I'm Corbett Wall with DVAuction, here with the cattle market summary for the week ending April the 10th, where you had feeder and stocker cattle markets and calf markets all kind of taking a breather this week. And you had yearling feeders selling mostly steady to $3 higher. And most of that higher was done early in the week on some early week auctions or on some direct trade that took part either last weekend or early in the week, and really just catching up from the higher markets that we had the week before. Calf prices were unevenly steady across the nation this week, and probably as close as you can get to unchanged whenever we measure them in single dollar increments, and the prices are mostly over $300. So pretty much an even market on your feeder cattle and calves this week. Auction receipts are plummeted this week, and we pretty much caught up with our sales that we've been running behind on due to weather delays, even in the southeast where they had some bad weather again this week, but we've pretty much caught up on all them. And seasonally, we're just dropping down to lighter receipts in all of our auction markets, and that'll continue progressively as we get into the hot summer months. And it's mostly because of grass. We've had warm weather prevail across most of the nation now. Every place has seen some warm, sunny days. And when you've got grass, there's just no need to move cattle. That's by far the cheapest way to hold your cattle and put weight on them is your grass pasture. And when you've got availability of grass, you've either got those cattle turned out or you're getting ready to turn those cattle out. Not a big need to sell cattle whenever you've got green grass out in the pasture. You might as well just turn them out. But your local markets in some of those places, especially in Kentucky and Tennessee, saw some rains. We saw big kind of severe weather go from Oklahoma across Missouri, Arkansas, into your lower Midwest and into your southeast, going out to the mid-Atlantic states there. And with that volatile weather, we hate to see the severe weather come, but you're going to see some rainstorms come across too. So even though we started out on kind of a dry year on our pastures in our grazing areas this year so far, we're starting to see right on cue. We get into some April showers, and it's going to be just right for that green grass to really pop, and most areas are seeing green grass now. At the bluegrass stockyards in Richmond, Kentucky, we saw that this week, and they benefited from local demand on top of the regular order buyers, but saw a part load of 579-pound steers bring 279. That's a big price for cattle out weighing that close to 6, and you might not be surprised to see that if they were sitting right outside Emporia, Kansas or somewhere and they were ready to turn out. But when you're that many hundred miles back east, that is a big price, and that information come to us on Cattle Market Central within just seconds of when those cattle left the ring. But you know, we're also seeing our farmers trying to get busy. They've been trying to put fertilizer and cut anhydrous here the last few weeks. We're starting to see some planting going on even in the lower tiers of your corn belt there, and they're having to kind of dodge those storms just like they do every year. They need the moisture. They're wanting to get their crop in, and that's just the nature of farming. And we're starting to see a lot more of that take place, and the market could become volatile depending on how much of that planting is delayed or gets done or what have you. But just not a lot of enthusiasm about farming this year, because those grain markets have been trading in a sideways pattern for a long time, and not really expected to jump out of that anytime soon. And it's really just kind of enough to pay the cost of production for most of these farmers. So even though farmers love to farm and they're getting excited about planting some seed, they're just not a whole lot of enthusiasm, because it doesn't look like they're going to have a banner year. And these reasonably priced grains have been keeping these cattle feeders as aggressive as they've been on buying these feeder cattle and feedlot replacements, because they haven't had to worry a whole lot about that input cost on the grains. And interest has been cheap and looks to stay relatively cheap for the near future, so that's kind of kept the foot on the gas on buying these feeder cattle. This week we saw about the same, and you know, they still want to, they got empty pens, they're wanting to buy these feeder cattle, so they're going right along here. They feel like they've got a good hold on this fat cattle market, so they don't lose too much market share as they go into the summer months when they got more cattle to sell, and they're hoping that the cattle they're buying right now will still be able to maintain a pretty decent fat cattle price. And we saw Tri-State Livestock Auction in McCook, Nebraska this week on Monday. They had 2 loads of big steers averaging $8.90, bring $209.75. Sold those in 2 separate loads. One load they're weighing just almost 9 at $8.95, recorded there on Cattle Market Central, and you could see that just within seconds after those cattle left the ring. That's a big price. Those cattle are going to need to really perform, and just like a lot of current purchases of feeder cattle, those cattle are going to need a fat market of well into the 150s for those cattle just to wash. So these cattle feeders are still feeling pretty good about their chance to make money on these cattle, and they're not having a whole lot of help from the futures board and not really able to lock that price in, but kind of betting on the come. And the cash markets have been running so far ahead of the board for so long that they're not really worried about that right now. And the CME this week dropped back from the open interest that we enjoyed. We saw some inflated open interest or getting back up to normal levels over the last couple weeks. Dropped back down this week, and as it does, you can see the volatility go up, and we saw some big swings in the futures market this week. But the big story this week was packers slashing kills as they have for the last several weeks, but this week estimated to be 502,000, and that is going to be the smallest non-holiday slaughter that we've seen in a long time of recent memory, really of modern times. And they're just running these change speeds at a snail's pace, just trying to hold back from having to give more money for these fed cattle, because right now, for just a few more weeks, we're running extremely tight supplies of market-ready, finished fat cattle that are ready to go to slaughter right now. And if those cattle, you know, there's just not many of them out there, and these packers don't want to have to compete too hard to try to get them. They don't want to give any more market position away. We're almost, last week, we were almost up there getting into that record price again. Had some cattle sell at 170. The all-time record high on a weighted average is in the 171 range there. So they were really toying with that. Did not want to give any more for fat cattle. They're losing money on these carcasses that they're putting up right now. And so they just had to do whatever they could to try to keep from raising that fat cattle market anymore. That brought on a new ploy for this week, which we really haven't seen on a wide basis and really trade the bulk of the trade. But just all week, everybody figured we was going to have at least steady, which would have been, you know, really good keeping that market up this high. A lot of guys thought they were going to get more for fat cattle because the market-ready supplies were so tight. But these packers come out with a new way of doing business this week. Instead of paying more for immediate delivery, like next week's delivery of fat cattle, they decided to reach out and go on a 15 to 30 day delivery period and pay less money. And your feedlots kind of gave into that, because when you get out 15 to 30 days, that gets into when these market-ready supplies are going to increase rapidly. And so they thought, well, we've gotten over the hump here. We need to start selling some cattle out front and stay current. So they sold a lot of the sales this week were $4 to $7 lower live, from 163 to 166. Dress sales are $3 to $9 lower, from 256 to 263. Now that's for 15 to 30 day delivery. So the big question is those guys that sell cattle every week and price them off of the previous week's tops or the previous week's weighted average, what are they going to do on next week's sales? We really didn't have enough confirmed sales to establish a market, so we're going to have some balking coming next week on what the market really should be. It was a decent market last week, so a lot of guys that ship cattle and trade off of the previous week's highs, the previous week's weighted average, are probably going to be satisfied with that. But at the same time, packers were able to go go ahead and go another week or two without having to raise the market anymore, but they really didn't get what they needed, which is immediate needs of current delivery cattle to get them through the next 2 weeks. We knew this was going to happen eventually because our spot market just continues to dwindle and dwindle on negotiated sales. So this could be the breaking point to see what we're going to do going down the road, because we're just not seeing hardly any negotiated trade anymore. But at least for the next 2 weeks, our estimated slaughter is going to be extremely light, because they're not going to have any cattle really to hang on the hooks. And that gets these packers into another bind, because most of them are in contracts with their employees to guarantee them a minimum number of hours, and a lot of them have really been cutting back and being dark several days during the week, and so we're really got to the breaking point on this fat cattle trade. Be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of weeks, but that pretty much wraps up your cattle market summary this week. Check out DVAuction if you still need to buy some bulls to get turned out there with your cows. We got several more bull sales coming up for the next month or so. And check out DVAuction for other regular weekly markets coming up this coming Tuesday at the Missouri Valley Commission Company in Boonville, Missouri. DV will be broadcasting the Missouri Livestock Marketing Association auctioneer contest. So check that out coming up this Tuesday on DVAuction. So check out DVAuction for this report and more information. Also check out the stockexchangenews.com for this report. And from my home DVAuction office here in Maysville, Missouri, we'll talk to you next week.